Steve, Nebraska has a new defensive backs coach, Addison Williams, hired from UCF, UCF's former defensive coordinator, and probably wasn't expected to be retained by Scott Frost and the new staff down there at UCF. But he comes up to Nebraska now as the defensive backs coach. Bit of a change for him. Obviously, he's kind of spent his career in the Southeast, in SEC country for the most part. So he comes to Nebraska, another guy with Florida ties, another guy with Southeast ties in general. Steve, kind of how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, it was a name that I don't think a lot of people just, it was on the radar for them. I think maybe some other names across the country as what were making more sense as a DB coach, but you know what? This is a John Butler connection type thing too, because when John Butler was a special teams coach at South Carolina in 2010, I believe it was. Um, Addison Williams was a grad assistant there. So there is a minor connection there between John Butler, Nebraska's new defensive coordinator and previous DB's coach, and Addison Williams, who's coming in to be the DB's coach. But yeah, Tim, let's just go through some of the coaching history with Addison. He played at South Carolina for Steve Spurrier from 2007 to 9 before a injury ended his career. He's a product at a Westlake High School in Atlanta. So again, it just kind of speaks to his recruiting ability and his recruiting territory, just sticking around in the Southeast, the Georgia area, Florida, obviously, and some other states around there. And yeah, he spent 3 seasons at South Carolina after his playing days as a grad assistant for Steve Spurrier. And then after that, he spent 4 seasons, I believe it was, at Tusculum College in Tennessee. And Tusculum College is D2. And Tim, what I like about guys when I'm kind of looking at coaches and determining if I like them or not, I always look, did they have to like start from the bottom and work their way up? And Addison Williams definitely has done that. So that's another kind of thing that I like about Addison Williams' resume is he wasn't just handed things once his playing days were done. He had to work for it, and he spent some time at the lower levels and worked his way up. So anytime I see that on somebody's resume, I like it because they know the grind, they know what it tastes like. They know what it feels like. They know what it looks like, and they're a hard worker. And if you're going to come work for Matt Rule, I think you really need to be a hard worker, and everything like that. So yeah, after that Tusculum College experience in Tennessee, he went to Furman FCS program and coached there for 3 seasons as a DB's coach. The first 2 seasons, and then his final season in 2019, he was a defensive coordinator. From Furman, he went and reconnected with Gus Malzahn at Auburn as an analyst and an assistant to Gus Malzahn for the head coach. And from there, he followed Gus to UCF, where he spent 2021 through 2024. First 2 seasons as DB coach, he was promoted to DC in 2023. And then, yeah, we can talk about that because there were some pretty good pass defenses for that 2023 season, Tim, right?
Yeah, obviously led the Big 12 in I believe it was passing yards and passing efficiency.
So that 2023 season where Addison Williams was the defensive coordinator at UCF, the Knights were first. Their pass defense was first in the conference, allowing opponents just 196 yards through the air. But the thing about that was they couldn't stop the run. The passing stats looked as great as they did because the defense up front, the rush defense was just not there. They didn't have the bodies, they didn't have the talent to keep up in the trenches and stop the run game. So that's why the pass defense looks so good, is because Big 12 offenses were just running the ball down their throats and not throwing it against them much. But that doesn't really kind of take me off of Addison Williams. I think he's a good coach, and he's going to bring a lot in recruiting as well.
For sure, yeah. I think you look at again what he's done in the back end, and again, he's not asked to cover the whole defense. He's really just asked to work with the secondary, and you kind of like what he's done across his career. And like you mentioned, a guy when you see a guy with the resume who's cut his teeth at lower levels of college football, there's so much more that is on your plate beyond your actual title when you coach at those lower levels, and so you learn a lot from those experiences. You're able to, okay, hey, Rob Dvoracek's out recruiting. This guy can suddenly step in and help with the linebackers. And that's just because of his experience, cutting his teeth at lower levels because of his experience across different levels of defense. This is a guy that, can start in the secondary, but you see kind of what this room is becoming. You see what the coaching staff in general is becoming. It's Nebraska's kind of this I don't know, think tank of defensive minds and offensive mind on both sides of the ball. You
Kind of
on
like
the
an NFL structure where you're
Yep.
bringing in a head coach for each side of the ball and let Matt Rule kind of be the CEO that he needs to do in the modern day college football with NIL and the transfer portal and everything that he needs to do as a leader of men and a leader of a program. You got Dana Holgerson, head coach on the offensive side. You got John Butler, who's spent years and years and years in the NFL, possibly potentially bringing in Phil Snow. I know that's been reported, but the hire is not yet official. So we'll just say reportedly hired Phil Snow to kind of be that overseer on the defensive side of the ball to help John Butler out wherever he needs it. Yeah, I mean it's definitely kind of looking like an NFL structure, both to the roster and the coaching staff when you look at it on offense and defense.
For sure, yeah, and compared to the staff that Rule brought in at first,
Mm-hmm.
I think every single one of these guys is in full control of their position group too.
Mm-hmm.
Dvorak had to earn that trust, but I think he's got it now.
Oh yeah.
You have DeKel Shorts now leading the receivers. He's fully in charge of that room. He's got experience there. He's got Dana's trust there. Bartel's in
Mm-hmm.
trust of his running back
Yeah.
room. Donovan's in Raiola. Donovan
Oh
Raiola
yeah.
is obviously in trust of the O
Offensive
line,
line
and then
room.
now Addison Williams, and fully in control
Mm-hmm.
of the secondary. And we can touch on the recruiting side of things here too. You can kind of see a trend here. Nebraska's hired three defensive assistants. All three
Yep.
have Florida ties, deep, deep
Yep.
Florida ties. Philip Simpson,
Mm-hmm.
obviously the strongest of the three.
Mm-hmm.
But Terry Braden has experience is from Florida. Still
Mm-hmm.
claims Florida as his hometown. Is going to be well welcomed back once he hits the road recruiting down there. Williams obviously did a really good job recruiting the state of Florida while at UCF. Obviously has a ton of ties down there from his time at UCF. Notably for Nebraska fans, he kind of led the charge in UCF beating out Nebraska for Raheem Stroud, a cornerback out of Tampa Bay Tech that Nebraska circled back on even late in the cycle. But a guy they really liked and one, down the line they could potentially get, if he ever enters the transfer portal. But you look at what he's done on the recruiting side of things. You look at kind of the relationships he has. You're seeing a shift too now with Nebraska, where at one point it felt, hey, maybe they're dialing back efforts in Florida. They're going full headstrong now. They are
Mm-hmm.
fully the Flowbraska movement is like full go at this point, I think.
And that big three of the guys from Miami that are still currently on the roster are going to be playing a big part of that as well in the peer recruiting department too. So I think that's just another kind of layer to sticking a flag, a recruiting flag in the state of Florida and having a serious presence there as well. But yeah, Addison Williams hire kind of maybe gives you just a cemented look at what the defensive coaching staff is going to be looking like at Nebraska. John Butler promoted to defensive coordinator. Terry Braden, that hire is not official, but he's already tweeting like he's the Nebraska defensive line coach. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch with him coming over from the Kansas City Chiefs, spending the last 8 years over there with the Chiefs. Kind of a good organization to be hanging around at. Phil Simpson, like you mentioned, outside linebackers coach. So that's going to be another interesting one to follow. Yeah, Rob Dvorak at linebacker, and then Addison Williams as a DB coach. So it's all coming together, Tim. December is being crazy right now, but it's all coming together.
Yeah, slowly but surely, the staff's coming together, and I wouldn't be surprised, for following this hire, you're going to start to see. I think Nebraska starts to really make some moves in the secondary in terms of the transfer portal. We saw post Braden hire, the Williams Avenary thing started to come together for Nebraska. Just once they have a name in mind and once you have a coaching staff in mind, it's easier to go to recruits in the transfer portal and say, hey, here's our plan moving forward. Maybe Nebraska does go out and pursue some of these UCF guys in the portal.
Mm-hmm.
Lee Hunter. We talked about that how bad that run defense was 2 years ago, which led to the pass defense being so good. The Lee Hunter was a big reason that the rush defense improved. Even the pass defense improved too. Just a big man in the middle, one of the better defensive tackles in the portal, commanding one hell of a market. Has Florida State, Texas Tech, and Texas all in the mix right now. They're hearing some pretty gaudy numbers for him. In terms of what he's demanding in the market right now. And we'll see if this hire potentially gets Nebraska in that mix. Obviously, he won't be his position coach or his defensive coordinator, but a familiar name now in
Hmm.
Nebraska for Lee Hunter. And then Brian Threats, another a DB, started his career at Cincinnati, was really productive at Cincinnati, didn't really play a whole lot at UCF for Addison Williams, but again, another relationship there worth keeping an eye on. So I'm interested to see kind of what over the next week. Nebraska's obviously going to bring in some transfer portal visitors. Be sure to check that out over at InsideNebraska.com. We've got a updated. I put up a Timbits this morning with some updated intel on where things stand in the portal. What's to come this week? What has happened over the weekend? And Nebraska's being aggressive. I think that they're doing a good job. But I think secondary now over the next week or two, I'd like to see that potentially get addressed here in the portal because they've only had a handful of guys really emerge on the radar. And I think, over the next couple of weeks, I think you're going to start to see more names pop up as, Williams kind of gets settled and starts to figure out who he wants in his room.
Now that they've announced, well, not officially announced, Williams will be the DB's coach, I think this is the green light for Nebraska to, attack the portal and those defensive backs for sure.
For sure. That'll probably do it for us. Just wanted to quick hit here on Williams. We're excited. I think we're going to be able to probably talk to him for the first time in the spring. Once spring ball gets going, we got to meet some of these position coaches. But we'll have more on him. As we kind of dive into him and the defense here in the offseason. Kind of just uh, you know, treading water right now. With all the news, so we haven't had a whole lot of opportunity to really deep dive on everybody. But we'll get that opportunity in the offseason. There's going to be some down months for sure. Here in once the calendar turns. So we'll have some opportunity to kind of deep dive and I'm excited to kind of break down what this defense is going to look like moving forward. I'm excited to see it in action for the first time. I guess the new defense in action for the first time
Hmm.
in the bowl game. But I think this offseason we're really going to see what John Butler's vision is for his side of the ball.
I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see what his kid, just because he's wanted this opportunity for a very long time, right? And now he has it, and that's got to feel good inside. And now he's bringing in some of his own guys to, help him along. So I'm excited about what Nebraska's defense is going to look like in the bowl game, in spring ball, in the 2025 season opener against Cincinnati in Arrowhead, Tim, in Arrowhead and Kansas City. So exciting stuff.
Yep, yeah. Recently announced Nebraska's going to play Cincinnati on Thursday in Kansas City at Arrowhead Stadium. That's probably going to end up looking like a home game for Nebraska, even though they
Yeah,
are
it's
the away
good.
team technically. I think that I think when that opportunity approached Nebraska to potentially move that game, they should have been all over it, and I imagine they
Oh
were.
yeah.
That opportunity to keep it closer to home and give your fans a little road trip.
I imagine Troy Dannon was like banging the table. It's we have to do this. So yeah.
No doubt, no doubt. But keep it locked over at InsideNebraska.com and the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel for our updates. As the portal cycle moves, the coaching carousel moves. Nebraska's finally settling down. It feels like on the coaching side of things. I think everything's
Hmm.
in place. We might see some analyst hires and some potential off-field assistant type hires here this offseason. But for the most part, I think every position group is intact and set. I think the next thing on the agenda in terms of position coaches is figuring out, what the contract situation for I believe EJ Bartel and Ed Foley, their contracts expire here at the end of 2025. So Nebraska's got to either figure out whether to extend or what they're going to do there. But that's the next domino, I think, for the on-field coaching staff. And I think figuring out who Nebraska's off-field coaching staff as well is going to be. Something they're going to figure out in the next few weeks, but that'll come in time. But I'll probably do it for us here. Keep it locked, like we said. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and we will be back later this week.